The year was 1898, and Europe lay beneath a sky the color of bruised iron. Snow fell not in soft feathers, but in shards, tiny crystals that bit the skin like they wanted to carve their own history into it. From the Baltic coast down to the Black Forest, the continent shivered under a winter far harsher than any elder could remember. Carts froze to the roads, riverbanks cracked like broken porcelain, and the cries of babies echoed through wooden homes where the fires burned low. War had already gnawed at the edges of every village long before the cold arrived. Soldiers marched with frostbitten boots, generals scribbled orders that turned sons into names on cheap paper, and families listened every night for knocks that might bring news they dreaded. But this particular winter, this unforgiving, merciless winter, seemed to join hands with the war itself, as if the sky had decided to become another enemy. In a small border village named Bruntel, tucked between the jagged spines of mountains, lived a girl named Anneliese Durer. She was 17, though hardship had added an extra decade to her eyes. Her family owned nothing more than a sagging cottage, a pair of goats, and a small wooden stove that croaked whenever someone fed it a log. On this night, one of the coldest yet, Anneliese sat on a stool near the window, watching snow whip past the glass like furious ghosts. Her little brother, Joseph, lay curled under 3 blankets beside the stove. Their mother stirred a pot that held more steam than food. The wind howled against the roof, and the house trembled as if bowing to the storm. At last, Anneliese whispered, "Mama, will the soldiers come through again tonight?" Her mother didn't turn. Her face was pale, lit by the sickly orange of the fire. "They always come through the mountains. War doesn't wait for storms." Anneliese hugged herself. She hated how the word war seemed to stretch into every room like smoke. Far away, a church bell tolled, the same bell that had rung for births, weddings, and feasts. But now it rang for warnings. Its voice wavered across the valley, swallowed by the snow but still unmistakable. Joseph stirred. "Is it the army?" His mother exhaled slowly. "Yes. They've reached the western ridge." Anneliese felt the air thicken. Every time the bell rang, someone in Bruntel went missing. Not always soldiers. Not always strangers. Sometimes neighbors. Sometimes fathers. She stood from the window. "Should we put out the lights?" "No," her mother said. "If it's dark, they will enter to check. Better to seem harmless." Harmless, Anneliese thought. A word that meant survival. Outside, the sound of hooves approached, slow, heavy, muffled in the deep snow. Anneliese's heart quickened. Horses meant military patrols. The door shuddered under a gust, and she instinctively stepped in front of Joseph. Through the window she could see them now, 5 horses, steam rising from their nostrils like smoke from dragons. The soldiers wore long coats, snow crusting their shoulders. She couldn't see their faces beneath their fur-lined helmets, but she could see the rifles slung across their backs. Cold metal. Cold men. Cold world. They stopped before her home. Her breath caught. One soldier dismounted, boots sinking halfway into the snow. His knuckles rapped on the door, 3 times. Her mother's hand trembled as she opened it. "Good evening, ma'am," the soldier said. His accent was not local. Foreign, sharp. "We need shelter for the night. And food. The storm is worsening." Anneliese could see his eyes now, pale gray, like stones left under the sea. Her mother kept her face still. "We barely have enough to survive." "Then survive by serving the army," he replied, stepping forward. "You will give what you have." Behind him, another soldier scanned the windows, his breath fogging the glass. Anneliese instinctively moved Joseph further from sight. The soldiers entered without invitation. Every footstep felt like another layer of cold settling inside the house. They placed their rifles against the wall and examined the pot on the stove. "What is this?" one asked. "Turnip soup," her mother said softly. "Not much," he muttered. "Times are hard," she answered. The gray-eyed soldier turned toward Anneliese then. His gaze swept from her boots to her braid. She couldn't tell whether he saw a girl or simply another resource to claim. He stepped closer. "What's your name?" Annalise's throat tightened. "Annalise." "Age?" 17. He studied her a moment too long. "Old enough to help the army." Her breath shivered. "Help how?" "Carrying supplies. Clearing snow. Guiding our patrols. You know these mountains." Before she could respond, her mother spoke sharply, "She is not strong enough." The soldier's expression hardened. War doesn't wait for strength. He turned to his men. "Eat. Warm yourselves. Dawn comes early." They sat, removing their gloves, steam rising from their fingers. Annalise stepped back until her shoulders pressed the wall. She had heard stories, terrible ones, of what happened when soldiers took what they wanted. But then, unexpectedly, the gray-eyed man removed his helmet and set it on the table. Without it, he looked younger, though no less harsh. He rubbed his hands near the fire. His voice softened, barely. "Your home is the warmest in this part of the village." "That is not a comfort," her mother muttered. To Annalise's surprise, the soldier almost smiled. A tired, broken smile. "No. It isn't." For a moment, the room felt different. As if war loosened its grip just long enough for human exhaustion to show. Then a sudden blast of wind shook the shutters. Snow burst through the cracks. The stove flames flickered violently. Joseph whimpered, and Annalise knelt beside him. The soldier watched her. Something unreadable passed across his eyes. He stood abruptly. "Prepare yourself, Annalise. Tomorrow you guide us through the northern pass." Her mother rose. "No. The northern pass is deadly in winter. She will die." "So will we without a guide," he said. "I will go instead," her mother offered. He shook his head. "We need someone young. Someone who moves quickly." Annalise's breath caught in her chest. The soldier approached her. He wasn't particularly tall, but his presence felt enormous. "You know the pass, don't you?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then you will lead us." "Refusal is not an option." She didn't answer. The silence itself was agreement. Outside, the storm screamed against the roof. Inside, the soldiers ate the thin soup as if tasting it for the first time in months. Her mother sank into her chair, face pale with fear. Joseph buried his head in Annalise's lap. She stroked his hair as if doing so could warm both of them. The soldier observed the three of them, a strange stillness forming in his expression, as though he were remembering something from before his life became made of commands and cold nights. "What is your father's trade?" he asked. Her mother answered before Annalise could lie. "Woodcutter. He died last winter. Fever." Annalise felt the soldier's gaze linger on her again, but this time it held something like understanding. War had made widows and orphans everywhere. He stepped back from the fire. "You will leave with us at sunrise." The words landed like stones. Annalise nodded slowly. She had no choice. The soldiers arranged themselves across the floor, laying out blankets, boots beside their heads. The gray-eyed man remained seated a moment longer, staring into the flames. Then he spoke softly, almost to himself, "This winter, it swallows everything." Annalise didn't know whether he meant the land, the war, or the people trapped in between. Hours crawled by. The soldiers slept, though their rifles remained close. Her mother rested in a chair, too tense to close her eyes fully. Annalise remained awake, listening to the wind claw at the walls. Far in the distance, she heard something else, something that didn't belong to the storm. A low, rumbling sound. Drums. War drums. Traveling across the snowy valley like the heartbeat of a giant. The soldier stirred. The gray-eyed man opened his eyes instantly. He listened. Drums again, closer this time. He stood. "Another regiment," he murmured. But fear, real fear, flashed in his eyes. Not all armies in Europe in 1898 were allies. Some were the kind that didn't take guides. Or prisoners. Or mercy. Annalise's home suddenly felt like the fragile shell of an egg beneath the boots of giants. The gray-eyed soldier whispered, "If they find us here, all of you will be taken as well." Annalise's breath stilled. "What do we do?" He looked at the window, snow slashing across it like claws. "We run," he said. "To the mountains." Her mother stood, trembling. "In this storm? We'll freeze." The soldier grabbed his helmet, rifle, coat. Better to face the storm than what marches behind those drums. The drums thundered again, so loud now the stove rattled. Joseph clung to Annalise's arm. The soldiers rushed to gather their things. The gray-eyed soldier stepped close to Annalise. "You know the forest paths?" "Yes." "Good. Tonight, you won't be guiding us. You'll be guiding your family." She swallowed hard. "Why are you helping us?" He paused only a moment. "Because winter isn't the only thing swallowing lives." Then he opened the door. A blast of ice-cold wind roared inside. Snow piled against the threshold like waves. "Run," he said. And with that single word, the night changed forever. The family stepped into the storm, into the jaws of winter, into the unknown mountains. The drums continued to shake the valley. War had come. And the snow listened. The storm swallowed every sound the moment Annalise stepped outside. Snowflakes, fierce as needles, stung her cheeks and clung to her lashes until the world blurred into a cold, trembling whiteness. Her breath turned instantly to frost. Joseph clung to her cloak, his small fingers stiff with fear and cold. Behind them, soldiers hurried from the cottage. Their boots sank deep into the drifts, their breath rose as pale clouds. The gray-eyed soldier moved with startling purpose, reading the wind, counting the shadows, listening to the distant rumble of drums that grew louder by the minute. "Stay close," he said to Annalise, his voice steady though danger pressed on all sides. "We must reach the forest before the other regiment enters the village." Annalise nodded, her braid whipping behind her like a frozen rope. "Follow me." The wind roared so loudly it swallowed their words. It felt as if the sky itself wanted to push them back, to bury them under its anger. The village of Bruntel disappeared behind a curtain of white within seconds. The outlines of roofs, chimneys, and fences dissolved into nothing, like ghosts fading into the night. For a moment, Annalise felt a deep ache. Leaving home, even one filled with hardship, always carried a quiet grief. Her boots crunched into the hardened crust of snow as she led them toward the first cluster of pine trees, their black silhouettes shaking under the storm's fury. The branches bent under coats of ice, snapping occasionally with sharp cracks that echoed through the darkness. Joseph stumbled, and Annalise caught him. "I can't feel my toes," he whimpered. "We'll reach the forest soon," she whispered, trying to sound certain. But the cold was merciless, draining their strength with every step. The gray-eyed soldier kept scanning the valley behind them. Through the storm, faint flashes of torchlight flickered. "They're closer than I hoped," he murmured. "Who are they?" Annalise asked. "A regiment that answers to no command but bloodshed," he said softly. "If they find you, they will not spare even a child." Annalise swallowed her fear and pushed on. The first pines finally loomed above them, tall, dark guardians rising like pillars. Snow collected on their branches, muting the world beneath into a strange, muffled silence. The wind eased slightly, blocked by the trees, though flakes still drifted thickly through the air. Her mother collapsed against a tree trunk, clutching her chest as her breath came in sharp, painful gasps. "We have to keep moving," one of the younger soldiers said, stepping forward. "She needs a moment," Annalise snapped, surprising even herself. Fear made her voice sharper, harder. The gray-eyed soldier raised a hand. "Let her rest." But only for a moment. "We can't stay long." Annalise knelt beside her mother. "Are you all right?" Her mother nodded weakly. "The cold, it tightens the lungs." Joseph wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. The gesture was small, but in that brutal winter, kindness felt like fire. Nearby, 2 soldiers gathered fallen branches, dry enough to light. But the gray-eyed soldier stopped them. "No fire," he said. "Smoke will betray us." He looked at Annalise again. "You know these woods. Tell me, is there shelter ahead?" Annalise scanned the shapes of the trees, their familiar outlines distorted by darkness. "Yes," she said. "There's an abandoned hunting cabin an hour north, if the path hasn't frozen over." His jaw tightened. "We will go there." "But the snow," one soldier started. "We have no choice," he replied. They continued deeper into the forest, the pines closing around them like ribs of a great beast. Time passed strangely in the storm. Minutes felt like hours. Every footstep was an act of will. But slowly, the drums faded. The storm, however, did not. As they trudged forward, the temperature dropped sharply. Breath froze in the air before fully forming. Frost settled like white dust on eyelashes and hair. Joseph stumbled again, crying softly. Annalise lifted him onto her back, though her legs nearly buckled from the effort. The gray-eyed soldier walked beside her. "You're strong," he said quietly. "I'm scared," she replied. Strength and fear often walk together. She glanced at him. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Eric." It was the first soft thing he had said all night. "Why did you help us?" she asked. His gaze drifted to the darkness between the pines. Not all soldiers forget they were once human. They walked on until a strange sound reached them, something delicate, foreign, beautiful. A faint chiming. Like glass tapping against stone. Annalise froze. "What is that?" Joseph whispered. Snowflakes fell thicker now, and with each flake came a small glint, a tiny ringing sound. "It's ice crystals," Annalise said softly. "The wind shapes them when the cold is deepest. My father used to call it the winter bells." Her mother exhaled, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "He said it meant the mountains were speaking." The soldiers listened, transfixed. The storm had created something magical, thousands of tiny frozen bells swirling through the forest, chiming with each gust of wind. For a heartbeat, war felt far away. Then a branch snapped somewhere behind them. Eric turned sharply, hand gripping his rifle. Another snap. "Someone's following," he said. A soldier raised his rifle. "Could be the other regiment." "No," Eric murmured. "Their boots are too heavy for this terrain. This is something else." Snow stirred between the trees. A shape moved. Low. Large. Silent. Annalise's breath caught. "A wolf?" Eric shook his head. "Wolves don't move alone." Another shape appeared beside the first. Another behind it. Eyes gleamed from the darkness, yellow, alert, reflecting what little moonlight filtered through the storm. "A pack." Her mother gasped softly. The soldiers tightened into a defensive circle. Eric whispered, "Don't run. Running triggers the hunt." The wolves stepped closer, paws sinking soundlessly into the snow. They were beautiful and terrible, creatures shaped by the mountains themselves. Not hungry, not desperate, simply curious and dominant. Annalise felt Joseph trembling against her back. Her heart pounded like a drum. Then, the wolves stopped. All of them. Their ears flicked. Their eyes shifted toward something deeper in the forest. A new sound rose, low, rhythmic, distant. Not drums. Hoofbeats. Eric's face paled. "They've found our trail," he said. The wolves melted into the trees, disappearing like smoke. The horses' hooves cracked ice. Angry voices carried through the pines. "The other regiment." "They're close," a soldier whispered. "Run," Eric commanded. "We're near the ravine." Annalise's blood froze. "The ravine?" "The snow there is unstable. It's our only chance." They sprinted through the trees, breaths burning in their lungs. The storm battered them from all sides. The forest sloped downward, the ground becoming uneven beneath their feet. Behind them, torches flickered, orange flares stabbing through the darkness. Voices shouted. Gunshots cracked, echoing off the trunks. Down! Eric shouted. They threw themselves behind a fallen log. Snow exploded around them as bullets hit the ground, sending white plumes into the air. Joseph whimpered. Annalise covered his head. Eric fired back once, just enough to slow pursuit. Move, he shouted. They stumbled through the snow again, slipping on ice, crashing through branches. The ground dropped steeply. The storm raged harder. At last, the trees opened, and the world fell away before them. A ravine. A massive drop swallowed by swirling darkness and snow. Her mother gasped. We can't climb down that. We'll die. They will kill us if we stay, Eric said. The enemy regiment burst from the trees behind them. Torchlight flashed on rifles. You there, halt, a voice roared. Eric grabbed Annalise's wrist. There's a narrow ledge along the left side. Follow it. Don't slip. She turned. There was no ledge. Just a thin, icy lip of stone barely wider than a hand. We'll fall, she cried. Eric met her eyes. Trust me. The soldiers behind him readied their rifles. The storm held. Torches flared. Snow whipped like claws. Eric held out his hand. Annalise took it. And together, with her family behind and death before them, they stepped onto the narrow, icy path clinging to the side of the ravine. Everything depended on one truth. In the mountains of 1898, survival belonged not to the strongest, but to the most desperate. The wind roared like a living creature as Annalise stepped onto the narrow icy ledge. Snow stung her cheeks, and the ravine below swallowed every sound into a vast, dark emptiness, an abyss so deep the world seemed to fall into it. The stone beneath her boots was only the width of her hand. Ice clung to its surface like frozen glass, and each step felt like a negotiation between life and death. If she slipped, just once, she would vanish into the swirling white fog below. Eric's grip on her wrist tightened. Don't look down, he murmured. I already did, Annalise whispered back, her voice trembling. Then forget what you saw. Easier said than done. She pressed her free hand against the icy rock wall beside her, fingers burning with cold. Joseph clung to her back, his arms wrapped around her neck, trembling so hard she could feel his heartbeat through her coat. Behind them, her mother followed, taking slow, careful breaths. Two soldiers held her elbows, helping her across the treacherous path. And behind them, torchlight. Shouts. Hoofbeats. The other regiment had reached the edge of the ravine. Their torches burned like angry stars in the storm, flickering wildly in the swirling snow. Voices carried across the wind, sharp commands, cruel laughter, the crack of a whip against the side of a horse. Faster, one soldier barked. Annalise froze. What if they shoot at us, she whispered. They won't, Eric said quietly. Why? Because even they fear the ravine. The path bent sharply around a protruding rock, so narrow that only one person could cross at a time. The storm battered the ledge, blowing sheets of snow into their faces. The cold burned like fire. Annalise pushed forward, breath shallow, legs shaking. One misstep would end everything. The ledge sloped downward slightly, making her boots slide with each movement. Eric walked behind her now, positioning himself as a barrier between her and the approaching danger. Keep moving, Annalise. Slow, steady. Don't rush. But her breath came faster. Her vision blurred. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes, turning the world into white shadows. Mama? Joseph whispered. I'm here, their mother shakily replied. But she wasn't close, she was several steps behind, struggling not to collapse. The ravine echoed with the shouts of the enemy soldiers. They're trying to find another path down, one of Eric's men said. They won't, Eric replied, though his voice reflected little certainty. The ravine wall jutted outward suddenly, forcing them to turn sideways to squeeze past it. Annalise pressed her cheek against the ice-cold stone, feeling the sting of frozen air on her skin. Joseph whimpered. I'm slipping. No, Annalise whispered fiercely. Hold tighter. Just a little more. Her muscles screamed as she forced her foot onto the next patch of stone. The wind struck her side with cruel force. She swayed, her balance faltering. Eric lunged, grabbing her coat and pulling her upright. Focus on me, he said. Nothing else. His voice held a strange warmth, soft but desperate. I'm trying, she said breathlessly. You're doing well. It had been a long time since anyone had said those words to her. They continued inching forward. The storm grew worse. Snow slammed into them sideways, and the cold pressed into their bones. The ravine below seemed to grow deeper, darker, hungrier. A soldier behind her suddenly gasped. My foot. Snow shifted. Ice cracked. A cry tore through the wind. Annalise turned just in time to see the soldier slip backward, arms flailing, his body falling into the open air. Her own scream died in her throat. The man's voice faded quickly, swallowed by the abyss. Eric closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the grief was gone, replaced by that cold, hard determination. We keep moving. The surviving soldier nodded, though fear made his breaths uneven. Annalise felt tears freezing on her cheeks. But there was no time for mourning. The ravine didn't care about grief or loss. It only cared about taking more. They pressed on until the path widened slightly, just enough for them to stand without clinging to the wall. Her mother collapsed onto her knees. I can't go farther. Annalise knelt beside her. Mama, please, we have to move. I can't feel my legs. Eric crouched, examining her hands. Her fingertips were pale, almost blue. She's close to frostbite. What do we do? Annalise asked, panic creeping into her voice. He scanned the ledge ahead. There's a cave not far from here. A natural shelter. We rest there. The surviving soldier looked doubtful. Are you sure? I know these mountains, Eric said. I trained here. That cave saved my unit once. That small sentence, I trained here, revealed more than he perhaps intended. He wasn't just any soldier. He knew these mountains like a wolf knew its territory. Help her, Eric said. The remaining soldier lifted Annalise's mother, supporting her weight. We need to move quickly, he muttered. Before they find another way down. They continued along the ledge until a dark shape appeared, a hollow carved into the rock, partly covered by snowdrifts. The mouth of the cave yawned open like a great beast, offering refuge but also holding secrets. Eric motioned them inside. The air was still colder within, but sheltered from the wind. The walls shimmered with frost, and the floor was uneven stone coated in snow. Deep inside, water dripped from a crack in the ceiling in slow, rhythmic beats. Joseph let go of Annalise and sank onto the ground, exhausted. Her mother leaned against the stone wall, shivering violently. We need heat, she whispered. We can't risk a fire, the soldier said. We can, Eric countered. Not a large one. But the cave bends twice, smoke won't be visible from the ledge. He broke branches from fallen debris inside the cave, his movements practiced. Soon, a small fire crackled softly, its glow reflecting off the frost-coated walls like tiny orange stars. Joseph's trembling eased. Mama, your hands are warm again. Her mother smiled weakly. Annalise sat near the fire, letting the heat wash over her frozen limbs. For the first time that night, she felt something like hope. Eric stood near the cave entrance, watching the storm outside. Snow swirled violently past the opening. He had removed his gloves to warm his hands, revealing knuckles scarred by frostbite and old battles. Annalise approached him. You said you trained here. He nodded slightly. A long time ago. Before the war shifted north, before winter turned against us. She hesitated. Why are you helping us? Truly? You could have left us. He turned to look at her fully this time. His gray eyes, usually cold, now held a tired, weathered softness. I told you earlier, not every soldier forgets he was once human. Then why join the army? His jaw flexed. Because sometimes, being human is not enough. He didn't explain further. And she didn't ask. Outside, distant shouts echoed faintly through the storm, muffled by wind, but unmistakably closer. Eric reached for his rifle. They're searching the ridge above us. Annalise's heart dropped. Will they find the cave? Not if we move deeper. He motioned them away from the entrance. The fire was quickly extinguished, leaving darkness, though the cave walls still glowed faintly with trapped moonlight. They moved along a narrow passage until it opened into a second chamber, larger, with high ceilings and smooth stone walls. Stay quiet, Eric said. They won't hear us if we remain still. The wind outside howled. Boots crunched on snow above. Voices echoed faintly. Search the walls. They must be close. Annalise grabbed Joseph, pulling him behind a large stone column. Her mother held her breath, face pale with fear. Eric motioned for silence, finger to his lips. For several agonizing minutes, the enemy soldiers roamed the ridge, calling out, cursing the storm, checking every shadow. A rock clattered somewhere above, sending snow tumbling past the cave entrance. One soldier peered over the edge. Nothing down here. The ravine swallowed them by now. Move on, another shouted. We'll regroup at the ridge. Horses snorted. Hooves stomped. Voices faded. Only when absolute silence returned did Eric let out a slow breath. They've moved east. Annalise sagged with relief. But as the quiet settled, another sound emerged, soft, rhythmic, steady. Drip. 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 From deeper in the cave. Joseph tugged Annalise's sleeve. Annalise, someone's in there. She froze. What do you mean? He pointed toward a dark tunnel at the back of the chamber. I heard breathing. Eric lifted his rifle. Stay behind me. They moved slowly toward the tunnel, footsteps muffled by snow. The dripping water grew louder. The air grew colder. And then, a faint cough echoed from the darkness. Eric raised the lantern. Its light fell upon a figure lying against the cave wall. A young man, barely older than Annalise, wrapped in tattered military cloth, shivering violently. His lips were blue. His eyes half open. And on his sleeve, a symbol. Not Eric's regiment. A different army. The enemy. Annalise gasped softly. He's freezing. Eric kept the rifle trained on the stranger. He's dangerous. He's dying, Annalise countered. Her mother stepped forward weakly. We cannot leave him. The soldier on the ground tried to lift his head. His voice cracked like broken ice. Please, don't, let me die here. His plea echoed through the cave. Joseph hid behind Annalise. Is he going to hurt us? Eric's eyes narrowed. Not now. But if he recovers. Annalise knelt beside the stranger, ignoring Eric's warning. What is your name? The young man's eyelids fluttered. Lucas. Eric lowered his rifle slightly. You are far from your lines, Lucas. The stranger coughed. I deserted. I couldn't fight anymore. Annalise exchanged a glance with her mother. War didn't just make enemies. It made broken people. Eric exhaled slowly. We have no supplies for another mouth. Annalise's voice hardened. We didn't abandon that soldier who fell, and we won't abandon him either. Eric studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly, reluctantly. Very well. We help him. But he travels under guard. Lucas sagged with relief, tears freezing on his cheeks. Thank you, he whispered. The snowstorm raged outside. War marched closer. The ravine echoed with secrets, footsteps, and the faint sighs of the mountains. And deep inside the cave, beneath frost and stone, fate had placed a new stranger into their path, one who would change everything to come. For better. Or for far, far worse. The storm did not ease when Annalise, Joseph, their mother, and the two surviving soldiers, Marcus and the gray-eyed soldier named Oscar, finally emerged from the collapsing cavern. The violent groan of ice still echoed behind them, as though the mountain itself were warning them never to return. Snow burst out of the cavern's mouth like white smoke from a dying furnace, and the wind swallowed it as if it were nothing. They found themselves on a long, narrow ridge shaped by centuries of winter, a place the locals once whispered about in stories, the Ash Road. No one knew why the elders had given it that name. Some said the ridge had once been a lava channel before the mountains froze, others claimed it was where the Old Kingdom burned its traitors long before borders and wars divided the land. But in the pale half-light of morning, it simply looked like a spine of snow stretching endlessly between two cliffs. The wind screamed along its length. Joseph held tightly to Annalise's hand. The boy had barely spoken since the ice cavern. He was cold, exhausted, and afraid in ways he could not explain. His sister squeezed his hand whenever the wind howled too loudly. Their mother trudged behind them, her scarf stiff with frost, her breath shallow. The soldiers walked on either side of the family, silent guardians, though both wounded and worn thin. Oscar's gray eyes scanned the horizon constantly. Every sign of movement, every shift of the wind made his grip tighten on his rifle. Marcus limped heavily, leaving uneven footprints in the snow. His wound had reopened during the escape, blood freezing into his coat. He said nothing of it. The sky above them looked bruised, filled with thick clouds heavy with more snow. But beneath that sky, the world stretched wide and white, interrupted only by the jagged black lines of faraway forests and the broken silhouettes of abandoned distant farms. No matter how beautiful winter looked from afar, the truth was merciless. There was no shelter. No roads. No help. Only the Ash Road. And somewhere behind them, hidden within that storm, the war's shadow was still hunting. The tracks in the snow. By midday, the blizzard thinned enough to reveal the road ahead. Oscar moved closer to Annalise and pointed to a set of dark indentations in the snow. Tracks, he muttered. Fresh ones. Not wolves. Annalise peered at them. The impressions were wide, deep, and spaced far apart. Horses? She asked. Marcus knelt to examine the frozen prints. Yes, cavalry. 2 riders. Maybe 3. Passing only hours ago. Her mother's face tightened. Are they from your battalion? But the soldiers shared a look that told her the answer long before Oscar spoke. No. These are not ours. The cold seemed to press deeper into their bones. The wind carried the distant sound of something metallic, like a lone bell clanging, though too faint to be sure. They paused, listening. The mountains often played tricks with sound, throwing echoes across valleys until a whisper resembled thunder. There is a village another day's walk from here, Marcus finally said. If we can reach it, we can find food. A fire. Maybe a stable. How do you know? Joseph asked weakly. Marcus gave a small, tired smile. Because I grew up in these mountains. That tiny spark of hope warmed them more than the fire they didn't have. But the Ash Road was long, and winter was unkind. The snow burial. As they continued, the wind shifted sharply, rolling across the ridge like a living creature. Snow lifted in spiraling sheets, and the world blurred into a white haze. Then Annalise nearly tripped over something half buried in the snow. Oscar reached her instantly. Careful. But she had already brushed the surface with her boot. A helmet. Covered in frost. And beneath it, a face. Frozen in surprise, the eyes still open under a thin layer of ice. his mustache stiff with frost. His uniform matching none of the soldiers walking beside her. Marcus crouched beside the corpse, jaw tightening. Recon troops. The enemy sent scouts this far north. Oscar brushed snow off the man's sleeve, revealing an insignia none of them wanted to see. They're expanding, he murmured. They want the mountain passes before spring. Annalise swallowed. Is he the only one? Oscar stood slowly, scanning the snow. No. The ash road was littered with them. The storm had buried the bodies, an entire patrol swallowed by the blizzard. Some lay alone, others frozen together as though huddling for warmth in their final moments. Rifles crusted with ice lay at awkward angles. Horses lay stiff like carved statues, breath long extinguished. Joseph clung to his sister, burying his face in her coat. Her mother whispered, "Saints protect us." Even the soldiers, hardened by years of marching and fighting, grew pale. This wasn't just war. This was nature joining the battle. The wolf that watched. The ridge narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. Snowdrifts rose high on either side, white walls that trapped sound. Marcus paused suddenly. Across the drift, on a higher ledge, stood a wolf. Large. Silver-furred. Watching them with yellow, unblinking eyes. The wind swirled snow between them like a curtain, yet the creature did not move. Oscar raised his rifle, but the wolf made no sound, no growl. It simply observed them as though judging whether they deserved to cross its mountain. Then, it turned and vanished into the snow. Joseph whispered, "Was it following us?" "No," Annalise said softly. "It was guiding us." She didn't know why she said it, but deep inside, it felt true. The blackened snow. Evening fell, and with it came a strange scent on the wind, sharp and bitter, like burned wood. The ash road curved around a cliff, revealing the source. A field of blackened snow. Charcoal streaks. Broken wagons. Ruined crates. The scorched skeleton of a small supply camp. Everything was burned to nothing. Only the iron pots and bent metal hinges survived, twisted by heat. Joseph gasped. Who would burn things in this cold? Marcus answered grimly, "Someone who doesn't want others to use them." Oscar's jaw clenched. This wasn't an accident. It's scorched earth tactic. Her mother frowned. What does that mean? It means, Oscar said quietly, the enemy is starving the mountain villages. The silence that followed was heavy as fresh snowfall. Annalise looked at the ash melted into the snow and understood why the ridge was called what it was. The ash road wasn't named for ancient legends. It was named for war. The night shelter and the telling of stories. The storm returned with renewed fury as night fell. They found a hollow under a massive boulder, barely large enough for all of them, but it blocked the wind. Using branches they gathered earlier, Marcus built a small fire. The tiny flame flickered like a dying star, but it was enough. Joseph fell asleep almost immediately, wrapped in their mother's arms. His small breast puffed into the cold air in soft clouds. Annalise watched the firelight dance on the faces of the two soldiers, turning shadows into shifting shapes. Unable to bear the silence, she finally asked, "What happened to the world? Why are we all fighting so far from home?" Oscar stared at the fire for a long time before answering. When the winter grew harsher, far worse than any before, the kingdoms blamed one another. They believed someone had tampered with the mountain mines, with the coal supply, with the borders. He shook his head. War begins easier than peace. Marcus added, voice quiet, and winter hides everything, truth most of all. Annalise hugged her knees. Will it ever end? Oscar looked at her then, really looked. His gray eyes reflected the fire, softening for the first time since they'd met. It ends, he said gently, when the world remembers there is more to protect than to conquer. His words lingered in the cold air. The stranger in the snow. Before dawn, Marcus shook them awake. His face was pale. Someone's out there. The wind had softened, allowing sound to travel again. And over the ridge, somewhere beyond the boulders, a faint crunch of snow repeated at steady intervals. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Oscar raised his rifle and positioned himself at the entrance of the hollow. Then a shadow appeared through the swirling pale blue snow. Tall. Hooded. Moving with strange, deliberate slowness. Annalise felt her heart climb up her throat. The figure stepped closer, into faint dawn light. And what they saw made all of them freeze. For hanging from the stranger's belt were 3 military insignias belonging to 3 rival nations. Not trophies. Not stolen items. But sewn carefully into the stranger's coat. As though he belonged to none of them. Or perhaps to all of them. The figure lifted his head slightly. "Do not fear," he said, voice low and calm. "You're walking toward a village that no longer stands." Oscar frowned. "Who are you?" The stranger's breath steamed in the cold air. "Someone who survived what you're about to walk into." He extended a gloved hand and pointed toward the valley beyond the ash road. Smoke. Thin, gray, rising between the trees. Too much smoke. Too spread out. A village burned to its foundations. And the stranger whispered, "If you seek safety, you must follow me instead." As the light of dawn broke across the frozen mountains, Annalise realized something. Their journey was no longer about escape. It was about survival in a world collapsing on all sides. And the mountains had more secrets left to reveal. The stranger's presence changed the air around them. Not because he threatened them, he hadn't lifted a weapon, nor moved with a soldier's sharpness, but because he carried an aura of someone who had walked through fires no ordinary person survived. Snow clung to the hem of his coat in thick layers, frost curled along the edges of his gloves, and yet, he did not shiver. As if winter itself had accepted him. Annalise felt Joseph grip her sleeve, small fingers trembling. Her mother placed an arm protectively around him while Oscar kept his rifle raised, eyes narrowed, calculating. "State your name," Oscar demanded. The man tilted his head slightly, considering. "Names have power," he said calmly. "And mine is one that stirs unease among soldiers." Marcus limped forward, jaw clenched. "Are you deserter? Scout? Spy?" "None of those," the stranger replied. "I am a messenger." Oscar snorted. "A messenger who wears insignias from 3 opposing armies?" The stranger touched the patches sewn into his coat, one blue, one crimson, one black, each from armies whose borders pressed against these mountains like wolves circling prey. "I wear them," he said, "because I have walked through all their camps. And not one of them truly knows why this war began." The fire crackled softly in the hollow as silence followed his words. A warning carried by the winds. Oscar stepped forward, rifle aimed at the man's chest. "Why are you here?" "To keep you alive," the stranger said simply. "The village you're heading toward was burned in the night. Raiders. Survivors were hunted as they fled. The smoke you saw was not from chimneys." Marcus's shoulders slumped. "Then there's no shelter." "No," the man agreed. "Not on the ash road." Annalise looked at him closely. His boots were worn but sturdy, his scarf patched many times, his leather coat heavy enough to survive storms most men wouldn't dare enter. Long lines of exhaustion marked his face, but beneath that tiredness, something sharper lived, something watchful, almost wolf-like. "Who burned the village?" she asked. The man's pale eyes shifted toward her. "Those who no longer serve any kingdom. Deserters, marauders, scavengers. In winter, starvation births monsters faster than war does." Joseph whimpered. Her mother wrapped him tighter. The stranger continued, "You can follow the ash road and meet the same fate, or come with me." "To where?" Oscar snapped. "To a place where the war cannot reach you." "Not yet." Oscar scoffed. "Now we speak of fairy tales." But the stranger only looked at him with calm patience. "Fairy tales," he said softly, "are often born from forgotten truths. Choosing the unknown. The storm began to rebuild around them, wind curling in icy eddies, snow flickering like sparks. Oscar lowered his rifle, only slightly. "What do you gain by leading us?" he asked. "Nothing," the man replied. "But someone once saved me on these mountains. I repay the debt." Marcus frowned. "Who?" "My sister," he said quietly. "She died 2 winters ago." His voice cracked, not dramatically, not loudly, but in the small, brittle way that grief lives beneath scars. It was enough to silence all suspicion, if only for a moment. Annalise stepped forward. Her mother grabbed her arm. "Annalise." But she slipped free. "If he meant us harm," she said softly, "he would have left us to freeze." The stranger inclined his head. Oscar gritted his teeth. "If you betray us." "I won't." "Then lead." The stranger nodded once, then turned toward a narrow path descending the ridge, hidden between 2 cliffs. The snow swallowed his footprints as fast as he made them. The group followed. With every step, the ash road faded behind them like the closing of a heavy door. The frozen Bell Valley. The path twisted downward into a valley narrower than Annalise expected, shadowed, cold, and strangely silent. The snowbanks rose tall on either side, glittering faintly in the faint morning light. Then she heard it. A soft chiming. Delicate. Fragile. Like tiny bells tinkling in the wind. Joseph stopped. The bells again. The stranger did not look back. "You heard them in the forest too, didn't you?" Oscar frowned. "What causes that sound? Ice? Stones?" "Neither," the stranger replied. "This valley is older than our maps. Older than any kingdom. The wind passes through its frozen cliffs in ways that make the air sing." Annalise listened. The sound was beautiful, eerie but comforting, like distant music meant only for those who needed hope. "Do people live here?" Annalise asked. The stranger hesitated. "Not people like you." "What does that mean?" Marcus muttered. "Keep walking," the man said quietly. "A refuge hidden in snow." They walked for hours before the valley widened into a clearing where the wind softened and the cold felt less cruel. Tall pines formed a natural wall. And between those trees, half hidden by snowfall, stood shapes. Faint at first. Then growing clearer as they approached. Shelters. Dozens of them. Small cabins built of dark wood, their surfaces camouflaged with snow and pine branches. Smoke curled from some chimneys, rising in thin threads. Lanterns glowed behind frost-covered windows. Annalise caught her breath. "A village," she whispered. Her mother's hands flew to her mouth. Tears gathered in her eyes, not of fear, but of hope. But Oscar stiffened. "This isn't on any map." "No," the stranger agreed. "Because those who live here don't belong to any kingdom." Marcus's voice dropped. "Who are they, then?" The stranger looked at each of them slowly. "They are the ones who walked away from war." Annalise felt a shiver run up her spine. "Deserters?" Oscar asked sharply. "No. Survivors. Refugees. Families. Former soldiers tired of dying in someone else's quarrel." His voice softened. "People like you." The group exchanged looks, fear, hope, disbelief intertwined. But the stranger continued walking toward the village gates. "Come. You will be safe here." The village of winter lanterns. As they entered, lanterns swayed gently from wooden posts, their warm glow scattering snowflakes like falling golden embers. People emerged, wrapped in thick furs and patched coats, faces weary but curious. A woman stepped forward, her hair braided with frost. She embraced the stranger without hesitation. "You've returned," she said, relief softening her features. "Yes," he replied. "And I've brought others." She turned to Annalise's family, her expression kind despite the exhaustion etched into her cheeks. "You're safe now," she said. "Come inside. Warm yourselves." Annalise felt Joseph's small hand slip into hers. She looked at her mother. Her mother nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, the first warmth she'd shown in days. They followed the woman toward a long hall where smoke rose from a central chimney and windows glowed invitingly. But as they walked, Oscar leaned close to the stranger. "You said people like them live here." He gestured to the villagers. "What about people like us?" The stranger's eyes flicked to the soldier's rifle. "Soldiers are welcomed," he said slowly. "As long as they don't carry war in their hearts." Oscar frowned. "And if they do?" The stranger looked past them, toward the snowy trees, the shadows shifting behind the pines, the faint echo of the frozen bells. "Then the mountains take them back." The wind whispered through the lanterns. A warning. A promise. Or both. And for the first time Annalise realized. This hidden village was not simply a refuge. It was something older. Something deeper. Something the mountains themselves protected. The stranger pushed open the wooden doors of the warm hall. "Come," he said. "Your story has not ended." But there was no comfort in his smile. Only truth. And truth was rarely gentle. Snow had fallen for so many days that people no longer remembered the color of the earth. White drifts lay like heavy blankets across every hill, street, and rooftop, swallowing the world in silence. By the winter of 1898, the European countryside had become a land of ghosts, quiet, pale, breathless beneath the weight of the endless frost. On the sixth night of the great storm, the moon rose so faintly that it looked frozen in the sky, suspended like a shard of cracked glass. And beneath that trembling light, Alara and Jonas continued their journey toward the western ridge, where rumors spoke of a refuge, one of the last remaining strongholds untouched by the war that had swallowed the east. Their carriage creaked along the icy road, its wooden wheels threatening to splinter with every turn. Jonas held the reins tightly, his breath puffing into the frigid air in long white wisps. Alara sat beside him wrapped in two wool coats, clutching a lantern that flickered weakly against the wind. She could feel the cold creeping through the seams, numbing her fingers. "Another hour," Jonas murmured, though he didn't know if he was reassuring her or himself. "The map says the old ironworks should be near." Alara nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "If it's still standing," she whispered. Rumors had been swirling for months, cities collapsing under starvation, villages burning as armies marched through in desperate search of supplies, mothers wandering from door to door asking for milk but finding none. And then there was the frost, the terrible frost, breaking records and bones in equal measure. Some said the war had summoned it. Some said it was punishment. Others said the world was simply too tired to keep itself warm. And yet, despite everything, the two travelers continued their journey through the frozen continent, determined to reach the ridge where survivors were said to gather, scholars, soldiers, widows, craftsmen, even orphans. A society built from the remnants of what had been lost. As the storm thickened, their lantern's flame danced violently. Jonas tightened his grip on the reins. "We should stop," he muttered. "The horse is exhausted." Alara glanced back at the creature, its coat glistening with ice. 10 minutes of rest, she agreed. No more. They pulled the carriage beside a cluster of snow-buried trees. Jonas wrapped the horse in an extra blanket while Alara attempted to shield their lantern under her coat. The wind howled like a wounded animal, clawing at them from every direction. Then, in the distance, she heard it. A faint chime. Soft. Delicate. Metallic. A bell. Her heart leapt. "Jonas, did you hear that?" He paused, squinting into the swirling snow. But the wind swallowed the sound, leaving only silence in its wake. "I heard nothing," he said. "No, it was clear. Like a bell. Coming from the west." Jonas frowned. No one would be out here in this cold. But Alara was certain. She listened again, closing her eyes to sharpen the sensation. There. A tiny chime. Then another. Like the sound of glass tapping against glass. We should follow it, she said immediately. Jonas hesitated. Or it could be a trap. Desperate people do desperate things. Or it could be a signal from the ridge. He sighed heavily. If we go, we risk losing the road. And if we stay, the storm might bury us before dawn. Jonas knew she was right. With a reluctant nod, he gathered the reins once more. They urged the horse forward, veering slightly westward. The bell chimed again, this time louder, clearer, unmistakable. A pattern. 3 soft chimes. A pause. 1 sharp ring. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from the cold, but from a strange sense of hope. The pattern repeated. It's a signal, she breathed. Someone is guiding us. They pressed on, deeper into the storm. The Iron Chapel. After what felt like an hour of trudging through blinding snow, the silhouette of a structure emerged through the haze, dark, tall, and angular. As they drew closer, Alara realized what it was. An iron chapel. A forgotten church constructed entirely of dark metal plates, its windows frosted over, its bell tower cracked with age. Yet from its tower hung a small chain that gently swayed in the wind, tapping against the metal frame and creating the chime they had followed. Jonas exhaled in relief. So it wasn't human after all. No, Alara whispered. But maybe that's better. The chapel stood firmly against the storm, unmoved by the years of conflict that had ravaged the land. Its doors were slightly ajar, allowing a faint orange glow to spill into the snow. Alara's eyes widened. Someone is inside. Jonas reached for his knife. Stay behind me. They pushed the heavy door open, and warm air washed over them like a blessing. Inside the chapel, dozens of candles flickered, reflecting off the iron walls. The pews had been rearranged into makeshift beds covered with furs and wool blankets. A long table stood at the center, filled with supplies, bread, dried meat, jars of water. And beside the fireplace stood a woman. Her hair was silver, braided down her back. Her coat was old but thick, patched in many places. When she turned, her eyes were calm, tired, and kind. Welcome, she said softly. You followed the bell. Alara and Jonas exchanged a startled glance. You were expecting us? Jonas asked. The woman shook her head. Not you specifically. Only travelers. Anyone who still wanders this frozen land. Anyone trying to survive the winter that has swallowed our world. She stepped closer, smiling faintly. My name is Celine. Alara bowed respectfully. I'm Alara. This is Jonas. Please, Celine said, gesturing to the table. Warm yourselves. The night will be long and cruel. They obliged, settling near the fire. The warmth seeped into their bones, and for the first time in days, Alara felt her body relax. Celine poured hot broth into 2 cups and handed them over. The taste was simple but comforting. You live here alone? Jonas asked. Celine shook her head. Not always. There were once many souls here. Travelers, soldiers, even a few families. But the frost has taken them one by one. Alara swallowed hard. How have you survived? Celine's gaze drifted to the glowing embers. Because I must. Someone has to guide the living toward the ridge. Alara's eyes widened. You know the way? Celine nodded. When the storm clears at dawn, I will lead you. But rest now. Your bodies are weary. Jonas exhaled in relief. Thank you. Truly. Celine smiled. Thank me when we arrive. The path is not kind. Moonlight whispers. Later that night, as Jonas slept deeply wrapped in blankets, Alara found herself unable to rest. She stepped toward the frost-covered window and stared at the moon hanging in the sky, still frozen, unmoving. Behind her, Celine approached quietly. You feel it, don't you? Celine murmured. Alara turned. Feel what? That the winter is not natural. That the war is not the only danger. Elara hesitated. Yes. Celine nodded. Good. Your intuition will save you. She motioned for Elara to follow her to a corner of the chapel where an old iron box rested beneath a layer of dust. Celine opened it, revealing a stack of parchment papers filled with handwritten notes, diagrams of weather patterns, and sketches of strange symbols. Elara's breath caught. You study the frost? Celine nodded slowly. Study, and fear it. She pointed to a symbol drawn repeatedly across several pages, a circle surrounded by 6 jagged lines. This is what the old scholars called the silent cycle. A winter that returns every few centuries, harsh enough to reshape nations. It weakens armies, collapses empires, starves fields, and forces the world to begin again. Elara's heart pounded. So you believe this winter is fate? Celine shook her head with a cold smile. No. Fate does not freeze rivers overnight. Fate does not bury cities in a week. Her eyes darkened. This winter was awakened. Elara stepped back in disbelief. By what? By who? Celine exhaled slowly. That, my dear, we may learn at the ridge. Before Elara could respond, the chapel walls groaned as a powerful gust slammed against them. The candles flickered wildly. Jonas sat up abruptly. The storm is getting worse, he said. Celine nodded gravely. Yes. Because dawn approaches. And with dawn, the path becomes dangerous. The warning. Before they slept again, Celine handed Elara a small metal pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Keep this close. When the snow turns red, do not look back. Elara shivered. Red snow? Celine's expression was unreadable. You will understand when the time comes. The lanterns dimmed. The wind roared. The moon remained frozen in its place. And somewhere deep in the storm, a sound echoed. A distant horn. Long low. Haunting. Elara felt her blood run cold. Jonas, she whispered, that wasn't the wind. He nodded. I know. Celine extinguished the last candle. Sleep while you can. Tomorrow, the war finds us. The moon shone pale through the frosted glass. And the night held its breath. Dawn came slowly, as though the sun itself feared to rise over the wounded continent. The storm had not stopped, only softened, enough for pale gray light to seep through the clouds like a trembling breath. Frost covered the inside of the chapel windows, painting them with delicate white veins, and the air within had turned heavy with a sense of waiting. Elara woke first. She sat up, wrapped in wool blankets, and instantly felt the cold creep back into her bones. The fire had died down to embers. Jonas slept on the floor beside her, his breath slow and deep. And Celine, always awake before the others, stood near the entrance, her hand resting against the iron door as if listening to something beyond it. Elara approached her quietly. Is it time? She whispered. Celine didn't turn. Yes. The storm has not ended, but the path is open just long enough. We move now, or not at all. Elara hesitated. What was that horn last night? Celine's eyes narrowed, still gazing outside. The armies have drawn closer. War travels faster than wind when the land is starving. And when the frost wipes out the roads, soldiers march toward anything that still offers warmth. Elara swallowed hard. They're coming here? No, Celine said softly. They're passing nearby. But even that is enough to bring danger. Jonas finally stirred awake, rubbing frost from his eyelashes. We leave now? Celine nodded. Dawn is the safest moment. The cold is sharpest then, sharper than any blade. She turned to face them, expression grave. But you must listen carefully. There are things I must tell you before we depart. Elara and Jonas stepped closer. Celine reached into her coat and withdrew a small roll of parchment, tied with a faded blue string. This is the map to the ridge, she said. Not just the safe path, but the true path. There are roads not marked on ordinary maps, roads built long before the kingdoms formed, when the land was still believed to be alive. Jonas frowned. Alive? Celine smiled faintly. Perhaps a myth. Perhaps not. But myths matter during winters like this. She placed the map into Alara's hands. Its parchment was warm, strangely warm, as though it held the memory of a distant fire. And one more thing, Celine said. The warning I gave you last night. Alara instinctively touched the crescent pendant hanging from her neck. When the snow turns red, do not look back. Celine nodded. Good. Hold on to that. It may save your life. Jonas crossed his arms. What does red snow mean? Celine sighed, a sound weighted with years. It is the sign that the northern winds have changed direction. When the silent cycle reaches its peak, the frost bleeds iron from the earth. The sky turns the color of embers. And the snow stains itself with what lies beneath. Jonas stared. You mean the ground is dying, Celine finished quietly. A chill deeper than winter wrapped around them. Come, she said. We must not waste the dawn. The path of silent hills. The chapel door groaned open, and a blast of cold air rushed inside, carrying flakes that stung like needlepoints. The three of them stepped out, the horse trailing behind, its breath heavy and white. The world outside was drowned in pale light. Snow stretched endlessly over hills and valleys. The sky was the color of ash. Trees stood like frozen skeletons. And somewhere far in the distance, a low rumbling echoed, perhaps thunder, perhaps cannons, perhaps the shifting of glaciers. Celine led them westward, her steps firm even through knee-deep snow. The ridge lies beyond the silent hills, she explained. But the hills are treacherous. Many have crossed them. Few return. Alara glanced at Jonas. What makes them dangerous? The soldiers? Celine shook her head. The silence. That answer troubled Alara more than any mention of armies. They trekked for nearly an hour, the rising sun hidden behind thick clouds. The cold gnawed at their faces, turning skin raw. Their boots grew stiff with frost. And yet, Celine walked with unbroken rhythm, as though her body moved to some ancient beat the others could not hear. Eventually, they reached the first of the silent hills. From afar, they had looked like ordinary mounds of snow. But up close, Alara realized they were not simply hills, they were old burial mounds, long forgotten and frozen into shapes nature no longer remembered how to make. And the silence was real. So real that Alara felt her ears strain for any sound at all. No birds. No wind. Not even the whisper of snow beneath their boots. It was as though the very air refused to carry sound across this ancient ground. Jonas whispered, "This place feels wrong." But Alara didn't hear his words. She only saw his lips move. Celine raised her hand in warning. "Speak only in your mind," she mouthed. "The hills do not tolerate voices." Jonas looked unsettled, but nodded. They continued, one step at a time, through a world where sound did not exist. Each footstep felt like sinking into nothingness. Alara could hear only her heartbeat, a heavy pounding inside her skull. The horse snorted silently, its hooves kicking up snow that made no noise. Then, Alara felt it. A vibration beneath her feet. She froze. Another vibration. Like something shifting deep underground. She looked at Celine. The older woman did not react. But Jonas did. His eyes widened. He felt it too. The ground trembled once more. And then stopped. They stood motionless for several seconds, waiting, listening. But the hills remained still. Celine gestured for them to move. Alara reluctantly followed. But a sense of unease clung to her like frozen cloth. And then, they reached the final hill. And everything changed. The snow turns red. At the crest of the hill, Alara looked to the horizon, and gasped. The sky to the north had shifted color. A dim red glow seeped through the clouds, staining them like watered ink. And the snow. The snow was no longer white. Pale streaks of crimson stretched across the ground like veins. Jonas grabbed Alara's arm, his face tight with fear. "Alara, it's happening." Celine stopped walking. She stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Then she turned sharply toward them, voice grave. "Do not look back now." Alara's breath quickened. "Why? What's behind us?" Celine raised her voice, not shouting, but sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Do not look back. Do not turn. Do not listen." Something in her tone froze Alara more effectively than any cold. Behind them, the ground trembled again. This time, stronger. Snow slid down the hill in small avalanches. The horse whinnied silently, eyes rolling with fear. Jonas stepped closer to Alara. "Just keep walking," he whispered. But Alara saw something from the corner of her eye. A flicker. A shifting shadow behind them. Her curiosity clawed at her chest. But she remembered Celine's words. "Do not look back." She forced her gaze forward, her breaths jagged. Jonas did the same. But behind them, something rose from the earth. They felt the weight of it. The cold of it. The ancientness of it. The hill groaned. Celine moved faster now, urging them downhill. "Do not run," she warned. "Walk. Walk steadily. The ridge is close." The red snow deepened in color. The sky turned the shade of dying embers. The air thickened with iron. Then, a sound broke through the silence. A low, rumbling hum. It vibrated through their bones. Alara's heart hammered. Her legs went weak. She desperately wanted to look back, one glance, only one. But Celine's words echoed in her mind. "You will understand when the time comes." Alara squeezed the pendant in her hand and kept her eyes forward. They reached the bottom of the hill. The ridge was now visible in the distance, tall stone walls, smoke rising gently from within. Safety. Almost. Almost. And then, a final tremor shook the hills. A deep crack split the snow behind them. Jonas stumbled. Alara grabbed him. The horse bolted forward, breaking free from the reins. Celine called out, "Do not look." But her voice was drowned out by the roar that erupted behind them. Something ancient had awakened. Something older than the war. Older than the frost. Older than the kingdoms that had risen and fallen on this land. And the red snow belonged to it. Alara felt tears freeze on her face as she kept walking. Not turning. Not daring. Until Celine suddenly grabbed her arm. "We're here," she whispered. Alara looked up. The gate of the ridge towered before them. Wood and stone. Firelight. Movement. Voices. Life. Celine pounded on the gate. "Open! Travelers!" The massive doors creaked, slowly parting. Warmth spilled out. Dozens of faces appeared, survivors wrapped in furs, holding lanterns and spears. Alara and Jonas stumbled inside, breath shaking. As the gate closed behind them, the red sky cracked with thunder. Celine turned to the trembling pair. "You survived the silent cycle's awakening," she said, voice soft. "From this moment on, your world begins again." Jonas stared at her. Alara trembled. "What was behind us?" Alara whispered. Celine smiled sadly. "If I told you now, you would never sleep again." The gates sealed shut. The ridge held them in safety. And behind the walls, the red snow continued to fall.